Okay, so my FM24 content making journey so far has been experimental, but now I really need something to sink my teeth into. You know what? You're on. I've been wanting to do something with the Portuguese league after seeing how their top dogs have their league in a similar situation to that of what's currently happening in Scotland, but in a language I can actually understand. So let's talk about the team in question. União Futebol Comércio e Indústria de Tomar is a club based in the city of Tomar, located in the Santarém district of Portugal. The city of Tomar was the last Templar town to be commissioned for construction in the 12th century and one of Portugal's historical jewels. They also do a really cool festival every 4 years known as the Festa dos Tabuleiros, where there's a ton of parades, food, and religious symbolism that I've gradually begun to repress ever since I was 17.
This is the part where you're supposed to laugh!
While the football team is nowhere near as old as the city itself, they have existed for more than a century at this point. In fact, União de Tomar were a presence in the top tier of Portuguese football in the late 60s to the mid-70s, but throughout the last few decades, they have been in the equivalent of limbo, bouncing around mostly between the 3rd and 4th tiers of Portuguese football. They did manage to win their district's title in the 5th tier last season in order to move up to the Campeonato de Portugal, which used to be the 3rd tier but is now the 4th tier in the Portuguese footballing pyramid after the creation of Liga 3 in the 2021-22 season. Here's the plan. First, we get this club back up to the top tier of Portuguese football that they haven't touched since the 1975-76 season.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for them.
The competition will be tough in this tier though, as the Campeonato de Portugal has 56 teams in total within it, getting split in 4 separate groups of 14 teams. Teams play one another twice in the group stage phase, and if they end up anywhere between 10th through 14th, it's back to the district championship / 5th tier with them. If you get the top 2 places in your group, that moves you over to the promotion stages of the competition. 8 teams are then split into 2 groups of 4, they play each other twice, and the top 2 teams of each group win promotion to Liga 3. The first team in each group then goes into the Champions Playoff Final, where they play to determine the winner of the Campeonato de Portugal for the season. Phew, that was a lot. And yet, still less complicated than Major League Soccer's entire rulebook.
I want you guys out of my country by tomorrow morning. Brains. Every country in the world belongs to America. And how the bloody hell are we supposed to leave? I don't know.
So, we've covered the team and the competition. Let's go over the roster. There are some solid players on this roster, such as our wingers in Diogo Ismail and Patrick Igwe, defensive midfielder / team captain Siaka Bamba, goal-scoring attacking midfielder Thiago Vieira, and defenders Erivandro Banora and Henrique Santos, along with others. I did feel we could strengthen ourselves with what little money there is left on the payroll at the goalkeeper position, and eventually found keeper Ivan Cardoso on a free transfer to take over starting duties for current keeper Ivo Cristo. Formations-wise, I opted to go with a 4-2-3-1 and a 5-3-2 to rotate around until we figure out what works best. Although, as we got closer to the regular season, the first challenge would surface as Patrick Igwe, Diogo Ismail, and defender Artur Silva all picked up injuries that would see them out for the first month of the season, and in Silva's case, for the next 2 to 3 months. Thankfully, there was still enough depth in the roster for the opening game of the season to be a success against Mortágua, as União de Tomar managed a solid 3-1 win to open up the season. Okay, at least he's only out for 3 weeks, but the injury bug has got to stop already. The absences are definitely felt in the next game against Rabo de Peixe, as the team is leading 3-1, but that gets undone in the second half as Peixe rescues a draw against us. The 4-2-3-1 tactic sees mixed results to cap off August, with a win over União 1919, but a tough loss against União de Santarém to start September, who are one of the favorites to go up. This leads União de Tomar into their first match in the Taça de Portugal competition, or the Portuguese Cup for those of you who speak English and are somewhat intimidated by any word that has an accent over it. The competition is open to professional, semi-professional, and amateur clubs from the top 4 league divisions in Portugal, where the winners win a decent cash prize and currently a spot in the UEFA Europa League. Knowing how coefficient tables work in this game, that will likely be downgraded to a UEFA Europa Conference League spot in the next 2 seasons. Never mind all of that for now. For their first round match in the Taça, União de Tomar would go up against fellow Campeonato de Portugal side Florgrade, who were in Group B of the competition compared to Tomar's Group C. Florgrade ends up having to play catch-up all match long after conceding an own goal via Juan Figueroa, as Eric Prazeres then seals União de Tomar's place in the second round with a goal in the 85th minute. Their second round matchup was then set against another Campeonato de Portugal Group B side in Valadares Gaia. It's around this time that we pick up another striker on a free transfer in Lucas Oliveira for extra depth up front, and then follow that up with a frustrating matchup against Fontinhas, wherein Eric Prazeres goal in the 86th minute ends up not being the game winner because Siaka Bamba ends up taking someone's legs out, gets a red card in the 93rd minute, and Edu Silva scores on a penalty kick 4 minutes later to rescue a point for Fontinhas. The caveat on this is that Thiago Vieira becomes the record league goal scorer for the club, getting his 53rd goal in this last matchup. Silver linings aside, the rest of September sees União de Tomar defy expectations once again as they survive in the second round of the Taça de Portugal by beating Valadares Gaia on penalty kicks, setting them up for a third round matchup against Campeonato de Portugal Group D side Vitória de Setúbal. October arrives and we pick up another free transfer in midfielder Laton to help with the depth of the roster as the team manages to beat Peniche 2-1 but loses in a tough encounter against Sertanense where Siaka Bamba gets sent off by trying to take somebody's legs from underneath him. Again. That said, the third round of the Taça de Portugal can be argued to be the match of the tournament thus far, as both União de Tomar and Vitória de Setúbal take a what the f is a defense approach to the game and make it a slugfest of goals. But it would be Gui Nunes who would seal the deal in the 95th minute, winning the game late and getting União de Tomar a 4th round matchup against Grupo Desportivo de Chaves, a team that plays in the top tier of Portuguese football along with the country's big 3 in FC Porto, Sporting CP, and SCL Benfica. The new signing in Lucas Oliveira made an impact in Tomar's next match to cap off October against Vitória de Sernache, scoring the winning goal in the 82nd minute. That victory has the club only 5 points away from challenging for the top 2 spots in their group. The team manages to keep their winning ways going as they manage to snag 3 points against Marinhense at their house, but the rest of November is a reminder that as a team, União de Tomar still has a long way to go. They fall at home to Lusitania Açores in a 4-2 loss, and in their next game, they get shut out entirely by Chaves in a 2-0 loss to end their Taça de Portugal run. But look, they got a good chunk of change for a semi-professional club by going as far as they did in the competition. December was a new month and the team did get that memo, as Gui and Gui Nunes, not related, found their match-winning goals against Gouveia in the last 20 minutes of the second half. União de Tomar then hosts Benfica Castelo Branco, as Lucas Oliveira gets another late game winner once the boys realize they're actually not playing Benfica, but one of their subsidiaries. Another 2-1 win to cap off December is in the books with another late game winner, this time by Guilherme Graça over FC Alverca's B team. This win puts União de Tomar in second place of Group C to end the year, having the edge over Benfica CB due to their head-to-head advantage. Into 2024, another defensive player is added to the rotation, as fullback Ricardo Caeiro comes into the club on a free transfer. We also ended up selling Patrick Igwe to Finnish club SJ Seinäjoki for a 1.4k pound transfer fee before hosting Habbo Peixe at home and beating them 1-0. But after the next game, where Mortágua beat us 3-0 in their house, Captain Siaka Bamba decided to raise hell about Patrick Igwe being sold and managed to convince most of the core players at the club that he is in the right about throwing this fit.
A few minutes later,
I managed to quell their doubts by saying that I would be happy to look for free agency to strengthen the midfield, only to then have Siaka Bamba show up the next day raising hell again and getting 3 other guys to agree that I lost the locker room. My brother in Christ, we are literally in 2nd place in our group! Ivo Cristo siding with Bamba also just made it all that much easier to sell him for £25 to Torreense. Thankfully, Thiago Vieira seemed to get his collective together from siding with Bamba and scored a brace to help us beat União 1919 in their own ground. União de Tomar then capped off the month with a 2-2 draw against first place União de Santarém in order to keep both clubs within the top 2 spots of Group C. February would mark us grabbing Siaka Bamba's eventual long-term replacement in defensive midfielder Tomelo Maka, dealing with an injury to Ricardo Caeiro that would keep him out for over a month or so, and resulting in an undefeated month with victories over Fontinhas, Peniche, and draws against Sertanense and Vitória de Sernache to continue holding on to 2nd place in Group C. With only 5 games to go in the group stage phases, I tinkered with the 4-3-3 tactic we'd been rotating in every so often and watched the fellas execute it incredibly well as they managed to win 4 out of those last 5 games, securing first place in Group C on the last day after beating Alverca B and moving on to the promotion stage of the Campeonato de Portugal. It did cost losing Lucas Oliveira and Guilherme Barbosa until mid-April and Leandro Felipe for the rest of the season with injuries, but look, sacrifices must be made. União de Tomar would be sorted in Group A of the promotion stage with fellow Group C foe União de Santarém and Group D's 2 best teams in Luletano and Juventude Évora. Their first game of the promotion stage group would be against Luletano, and the boys managed to make the most of their opportunities with a 2-0 win. The next match against União de Santarém, well, it was a dominant 3-1 win for them. Following that, the game against Juventude Évora would not start well as União de Tomar would surrender a penalty kick in the first 2 minutes and Évora would score. But that early goal ended up lighting a fire under the team's asses as they would score 4 unanswered to win it 4-1. The rematch against União de Santarém would happen at home for União de Tomar, and the boys would manage a 2-0 clean sheet against their opponents to be 1 step closer to promotion to Liga 3. Once again, sacrifices must be made. Going into Luletano's ground, União de Tomar would be on the back foot after a Setila goal in the 33rd minute, but Thiago Vieira just cannot stop scoring goals, because he ends up dropping another brace in the second half of this game and helps us turn it all around, emerging victorious with a 2-1 win and punching União de Tomar's ticket into promotion. They'd wrap up the promotion stage by beating Juventude Évora 3-1 in the final game, and with results elsewhere going their way, União de Tomar seized the top spot in Group A, and with it, they are Champions playoff final bound against Group B's winner, Vilar de Perdizes. Both teams have won promotion, but this one would be an extra trophy for the cabinets and for bragging rights, so both teams are taking their chances whenever they present themselves. But it is Siaka Bamba who breaks the deadlock with a header off of a set-piece free kick in the 52nd minute. I take back almost everything bad I ever said about this man. Leandro Felipe decided to go coast to coast and through multiple Perdizes defenders in order to extend the lead to 2-0 for União de Tomar. While Vilar de Perdizes would get a goal back via a header from Pedro Miguel in the 80th minute, it would not be enough, as União de Tomar are your 2023-24 Campeonato de Portugal champions.
Success!
The fans are ecstatic, the board is ecstatic, I am ecstatic. The team showed incredible resiliency in their results this year, and it was completely proper for Thiago Vieira to be considered the player of the season by the fans, given the 17 goals and 11 assists this year. Lucas Oliveira's arrival at the striker position also helped us with 12 goals in total, as he was voted by the fans to be the signing of the season. Overall, having the team who scored the most goals across the entire 4th tier may have been the difference, even if the other stats weren't so hot. But there's always room for improvement, and with a decent enough budget to work around between transfer funds and payroll, we'll be able to reevaluate the current roster and look at where to improve it for the Liga 3 campaign, where the board has set up bold expectations to have us be a mid-table team in the 3rd tier. But they left us with a gift before the end of the season, as the board decided to take the steps to have the club ready to return to full-time professional status. Oh, and as for Siaka Bamba, I realized his contract was running out at the end of the season, and just decided not to re-sign him. So I guess we gotta find a new captain now.
3 days later.
Fuck it, that's good enough. Last season, we managed to score our way into a Campeonato de Portugal title and promotion to the 3rd tier of Portuguese football. But in order to get União de Tomar back to the 1st division, we gotta tackle Liga 3 and its rather unconventional format. We'll talk about that later, but even with that challenge, we are in a good position to take on it due to the club turning professional. But being a pro team does have a slight downside in that we do have to move into a stadium that's about an hour south for our home games for the foreseeable future due to our current ground not fitting the league parameters. That said, we're going to need a few more players to help fill out the roster and give us the necessary depth to rotate a squad between league games and eventual Taça de Portugal games. Given that we have a modest budget, I took a look at the free transfer market, and within it, I found a 35-year-old veteran attacking midfielder in Rui Pedro, whose career has taken him all over Europe, and that kind of experience will be instrumental for us going forward. Following that, we did spend about 1.3k pounds on defensive midfielder Tomás Gutierrez from Imortal in order to shore up the backline in the midfield, and after finding him in the free transfer market, I couldn't resist bringing in Sierra Leonean goalie Ibrahim Sesse into the fold, as he has the potential to grow into a goalie that can carry the team both through Liga 3 and even at the tiers above in Portuguese football. Additionally, midfielder Antonio Baixinho and fullback Mika were brought on board to provide further depth and experience at this level of football. Let's talk about Liga 3. The board has the expectations for União de Tomar to attempt to avoid relegation from the 3rd tier outright, which is not going to be easy. The 3rd tier of Portuguese football has a total of 20 teams split across 2 groups of 10 in its first stage. The top 4 teams in each respective group move on to a championship group stage, while the latter 6 of the group go to the relegation stage. If you're in the championship group, 1st and 2nd place guarantee you a promotion into Liga Portugal 2, while 3rd place has your team put in a playoff game against a 2nd tier team, but if you're in the relegation stage, you're fighting to not end up in 5th or 6th place, which are the relegation spots back to the Campeonato de Portugal. Once again, this is a whole lot, but it is somehow not as complicated as the playoff rules in the Canadian Premier League. Speaking of which, this is as good of a time as any to let you know that you can catch me and many other North American creators on Twitch every Thursday night from 4:30 p.m. Pacific time and into the night, as we stream an 8-person PvP network game under the North American Creators League, or NACL for short, in which we currently play in the CPL and look to achieve the ultimate glory of winning championships, bragging rights, all under the league's rules and restrictions. It's been a learning experience in many ways for me as a creator in this sphere, and I urge you all to come check us out sometime, as there are some incredible people in the scene making this all happen. The links to all the creators involved will be down in the description. Back to business here. The 3rd tier is a bit of a learning curve for the boys, as the initial results see us draw against UD Oliveirense to open up the season, but a very positive result against Sporting CP's B team with a 3-2 win, where Rui Pedro scores an impressive hat-trick. The following game does see a 4-1 loss to fellow promoted side Luletano in rather embarrassing fashion to wrap up August. A goalless draw against Académica starts off September, but the team is still in good spirits as we got our second round draw for the Taça de Portugal against fellow Liga 3 side in Futebol Clube de Felgueiras. A matchup against Pero Pinheiro is next on the list, as the team is ready to tackle anything that could be possibly thrown their way. A 3-2 loss later, and we realize that the key signing we got during this offseason is basically out for a majority of the year and is now contemplating retirement once the season's all done. Oh, and our captain pulled his calf and is out for the rest of the month.
I am in incredible pain.
It takes a bit of digging in the days leading up to our Taça de Portugal game against Felgueiras to find Rui Pedro's replacement, but I do end up finding and signing a free transfer gem in Rafa Pinto just in the nick of time. The game against Felgueiras is one in which Anderson Filho gave us the lead early on, but after conceding another late game goal, the game eventually carried all the way on to penalty kicks, where Ibrahim Sesse's big save in the first round of them proved to be the difference, as a 5-4 on those carries União de Tomar onto the third round of the cup. Turns out he made that save with a bruised shoulder, but you know the adage by now, sacrifices must be made. The momentum of the cup win did seem to carry across, as a dominant win against AD San Joaense follows suit to wrap up September, but the essential part of it all came on the tactic that ended up being used in that game, as I decided to go for a more attacking 4-2-3-1 based on what a certain Norwegian manager once did before he got proven as a fraud and escaped into the annals of history. I mean, imitation is the best form of flattery, am I right? Let's just move on. A draw against Oliveira do Hospital follows suit, although Thiago Vieira spraining his ankle for the next 4 to 5 weeks is the bigger story here, as the injury bug has definitely been hitting the team lately. Somehow, that doesn't deter the team's momentum, as a 4-1 win against Sporting Clube da Covilhã sees new arrival Rafa Pinto get a hat-trick, and the new offensive tactic also catches another club by surprise, as União de Tomar manages their biggest Taça de Portugal victory yet with a 2-1 victory over Liga Portugal side Torriense, which is an unexpected upset for our side to grab. For that accomplishment, we ended up paired against another Liga Portugal side in Tondela for the 4th round. We then wrap up October with a draw against Caldas, and November sees the team continue its unbeaten ways from the previous month, as the Sporting CP's B team is beaten once more. We rescue a late game draw against Oliveirense, and then get revenge on Loletano by beating them 3-1. November is then wrapped up with a huge 4th round matchup in the Taça de Portugal. The hosts end up getting the night started with a Yaya sit-hole goal, and an injury to Anderson Filho mid-game is not ideal. But Lucas Oliveira manages to get the tying goal in the late stages of the game, and yet again, we drag this entire thing kicking and screaming to penalty kicks. All takers coolly and collectively are slotting their penalties in, but Ibrahim Sesse decides to pull out the late game heroics against Esquerdo in the 5th round, setting up Lucas Oliveira to be the other half of the winning equation, and União de Tomar yet again punches above their weight.
You crying?
They advance to the 5th round of the competition and do end up with a much luckier draw this time around, as they will host a Campeonato de Portugal side in Grupo Desportivo Peniche in the 5th round. We do start December with a loss to Académica in Liga 3, but the boys find their form again with a dominant 6-1 victory against Pero Pinheiro, and they proceed to go undefeated for the remainder of the month, guaranteeing a spot in the upcoming promotion group. During the month, we also got a bid and then sold Guilherme Barbosa to Kristianstad FC for over 2k because, well,
Hello, I like money.
the win streak from December continues into January as the month kicks off with the 5th round of the Taça de Portugal, where a Gui Nunes goal is enough to see us defeat a very game Peniche squad. Our reward for beating a team a tier below us is getting matched against another Liga Portugal side in Casa Pia for the quarterfinals. At this point, all of the Group B promotion spots are decided, and so I treated the final 2 games of the first stage as a warm-up for the eventual championship group, as we defeated SP Covilhã and suffered our first loss since early December to Caldas. We ended up with a respectable second place finish in our group, and with the 6th round of the cup coming through, that's where a problem decided to rear its ugly head. Thiago Vieira decided to take the mantle from Siaka Bamba as the resident pain-in-my-ass influential player by bringing forth concerns about the team lacking sufficient quality squad depth?
Many unbearable hours later.
Okay, you know what? We're not repeating the whole Siaka Bamba nonsense from last year all over again.
I'm serious. I'm not going to sit back and take this.
Through the intermediary system, Vieira gets sold to Espinho within a couple of days, and we get nearly 6k out of the deal. We then use the extra money to pick up center back Pedro Caeiro and backup keeper Nuno Silva on free transfers as insurance policies for the championship group. Thus, the quarterfinals of the Taça de Portugal are upon us, with the team headed to Lisbon to play against Casa Pia Atlético Clube. Fun fact, their team name is named after a Portuguese children's charity, and a lot of the athletes they have in their sports clubs come from that institution. So we do the complete opposite of charity work, as Pedro Caeiro scores on his debut for the club, and we beat Casa Pia 2-0, even after being outshot, out-XG'd, and out-possessed. We also may have just somehow bullshitted our way into being the first Liga 3 team to ever make a semi-final in this competition? Go figure, this is where the draw finally goes against us, and thus we get to go up against SL Benfica in the semi-final. For the first time in decades, we would face one of the big three in Portuguese football, and to those who aren't familiar with what Benfica does to 99% of their fellow countrymen, this is the equivalent of going from easy to European extreme difficulty on a Metal Gear Solid game. It's just straight up not going to be a good time.
Flashback to the future!
We lost the two legs of the semifinals by an aggregate score of 5-3, lost both games, and overall were dominated by them in such a manner that I would rather talk about anything else. Let's shift our focus over to the Liga 3 championship group. As we promptly lose a key contributor to the squad just days before our opening game of this stage against Fafi, and that game ends up being a 2-2 draw. To their credit, the team managed to bounce back after breaking through Lenk FC Vilaverdense's defenses to score twice in the second half of this game. As for why a Portuguese team is named Lenk FC Vilaverdense, well, imagine the Red Bull situation with various teams across the globe, only with a Canadian company doing that in 2020 and pissing off the supporters in the process of changing the team's name and badge. Corporate greed stripping off the entire charm out of a club with horrible changes aside, February is wrapped up with a stinger of a loss to Oliveira do Hospital. Given their resiliency shown in the aftermath of losses, União de Tomar fully focus their attention on the matches ahead and go undefeated throughout the month of March in Liga 3, defeating the likes of Trofense, Varzim, and Vilaverdense, while managing draws against Sporting CP's B team and Caldas. Those results are enough to move them into second place in the championship group and put the team in a great position for a promotion bid in the remaining return games. The promotion bid took a hit at the start of April after we had to rescue a draw against 7th place Fafi. The race at the top was getting tighter in terms of points in the teams that were still in it, but a victory against Oliveira do Hospital the following week put União de Tomar on top of the standings with 4 games to go. Trofense played for pride in the following week and managed to hold us to a 2-2 draw, setting up a showdown between us and Caldas the following weekend, with both teams now being at 20 points in the championship group. Both offenses came out swinging on that one, but Lucas Oliveira got a brace and proceeded to lead the team to a 4-2 win that now had União de Tomar on top of the Liga 3 with only 2 games to go. For us, the task was quite simple. If we can beat the B team of one of Portugal's elites one more time, we will be crowned as Liga 3 champions.
2 hours later.
Sporting's B team whooped us 3-0, and they made it look easy. Additionally, with Caldas winning their game, that now meant the matchup against Varzim was essential to maintain title hopes and possibly the automatic promotion spot to boot. Thankfully, this game versus Varzim would be played in our temporary home ground, and it began to deliver on the entertainment factor early on as Lucas Oliveira opened the scoring for União de Tomar, and within 2 minutes of that, a thunderbolt from Varzim's Zé Valente tied it up 1-1. Varzim got their second goal not long after the first one, and it's becoming a bit of a concern on how they're dominating on shots in possession. But 10 minutes later, Diogo Ismail found Lucas Oliveira on a key pass for him to score from inside the box, tying the game up at 2-2. It would stay like this for quite some time. União de Tomar would start getting more chances throughout the game, but would be unable to capitalize, and Varzim wouldn't fare any better. The game looked bound to head to a draw, and with it, the possibility of second or even third place depending on the other matches of Liga 3 going on at the same time.
Escanteio no final do jogo, Diogo Ismail lançando a bola, Arthur Silva subiu, gol!
It is the game-winning goal at the death, and due to results elsewhere going their way, União de Tomar not only claimed promotion onto the second tier of Portuguese football next season, but they have won the Liga 3 title. It came down to the wire, but at the end, the newly found tactics and players behind them have made this an incredible achievement in the team's third straight promotion since the 2022-23 season. Rafa Pinto was chosen as the fans' player of the season and signing of the season due to his 10 goals and 12 assists throughout the campaign. Lucas Oliveira bagged a solid 15 goals in all competitions, and overall, a title win with automatic promotion and a once-in-a-lifetime run in the Taça de Portugal made this an incredibly successful year for União de Tomar, and unlike last season, we at least have no drama of any sort whatsoever heading into the new year. Oh, right, yeah. We also ended up getting quite the prospect in our recent youth intake. But looking at Marco Tavares right now, you know, something is missing.
You are gonna blow expectations.
After a heated race in Liga 3, União de Tomar managed to snag the Liga 3 trophy and with it, automatic promotion into Liga Portugal 2, Portugal's second tier of football. It was considered an overachievement by the press, but with our players and staff, especially free transfer signing Rafa Pinto, we made it possible. But now that we're here, the competition is going to be fiercer than ever.
And you better get started.
Liga Portugal 2 has 18 teams in total. They play each other twice. The top 2 teams get automatically promoted, while third place plays a 2-legged promotion relegation playoff against the 16th place team on the first tier. And if you're in the bottom 3 spots, well, 16th means you play a Liga 3 team in a 2-legged playoff, while 17th and 18th get you relegated back to Liga 3. Given our financial situation, I'm doing just about everything in my power to avoid relegation. Personally, I'm aiming for one of the higher place finishes, if not a promotion spot outright. Especially since 2 of the teams in this tier can't go up to Liga Portugal, as they are Benfica and Porto's B teams. Speaking of B teams, we got one of those 2 now. They will be playing at the lower district levels to start, but it will be a good place to start developing some of our players who are too old for the U19 levels, but not quite good enough to get into the senior team. Although, if we're going to aim for promotion, then we do have to improve the roster with players that can play well at the second tier of Portuguese football.
4 to 6 weeks later.
I may or may not have gone overboard by bringing in quite a lot of signings during this offseason.
I really don't understand it!
They all will play a role in our campaign this season, but personally, Luis Balbo Vieira, Aristide Wam, Guilherme Mantuan, Thiago Ferreira, and Thiago Gonçalves are the key signings out of this absolute spread of players. While guys from last season like Mika and Rafa Pinto earned contract extensions, some wouldn't quite make the cut, as Antonio Baixinho is sold for nearly 4K to FC Inhulets in the Ukraine, Ricardo Caeiro is bought for nearly 5K by Podhale, and Herivando Banora is sent out on loan to Inter des Caldas. All those moves were made just prior to União de Tomar getting their first phase draw in the Allianz Cup against União Desportiva de Leiria. Right, this kind of blindsided me too. but the Allianz Cup is just a fancy sponsored name for the Taça da Liga, aka the Portuguese League Cup. It was established in the 2007-08 season as an official competition for all clubs in the top 2 tiers of Portuguese football. Its format has teams play through one-legged ties in the first and second rounds, while the third phase becomes a group format of 3 teams in 4 groups, where the group winners then advance to the semifinals and final, which are a one-legged fixture played in a neutral ground. They also have this one rule about 2 U21 Portuguese guys having to be on the starting lineup for each game too.
Won't somebody please think of the children?
But unlike many other League Cups in Europe, there is no European qualification spot that's automatically earned by claiming this bad boy. Still, it doesn't stop us from taking down Leiria 3-1 to advance to the second phase because as a club trying to rise through the ranks, we're going to need all the capital we can get. That win led to us getting Tondela in the second phase, and oh, by the way, these games are all happening in between preseason friendlies for Liga Portugal 2. No big deal, as we stomped out Tondela with a 3-0 win to punch our way into the third phase of the cup. After that match, friendlies are then wrapped up and we can now fully focus on our Liga Portugal 2's debut. Rafa Pinto proceeds to shine with a brace against Mafia in our Liga Portugal 2's debut, as a solid 3-0 win is achieved, and that debut sets the tone for the rest of the month. As we manage a comeback victory against Feirense, get a 2-0 clean sheet against Penafiel, and new signings Aristide 1 and Thiago Ferreira score late in the second half to help us triumph over Belenenses to wrap up the month in 3rd place. I also couldn't help myself as I ended up signing more free transfer players, such as Kosovan center Lombard Delova to slot in as a starter at the position, and Australian forward Archie Goodwin because, well, let's just say I have a feeling about this guy. Our old Liga 3 friends in Caldas are up to start September, and hey, look at that, Archie Goodwin is already scoring a goal in his debut. That's 5 straight victories for us in the league. Our second round matchup for the Taça de Portugal was then announced against Luletano shortly after. While we can only get a draw against Torriense to follow those past wins, we're still in a comfortable spot in the standing. I guess it's a good thing we got Thiago Gonçalves after all. Also, here's another free agency signing in Brian Ferreira, and I swear this is it on new people coming into the club. For now. It's a good thing that we got him because in the second round of the Taça de Portugal, Luletano actually pushed us to extra time, and Ferreira was one of the 2 men to score in extra time to ensure we didn't end up being on the receiving end of a giant slaying like we've been doing the past 2 seasons in this tournament. Fellow Liga Portugal 2 side Feirense would be next in the Taça de Portugal, but we go from one cup to another as our first match in the 3rd phase of the Allianz Cup against Boa Vista came along. We got sorted in a group with them and Braga, both clubs in Liga Portugal above us. Boa Vista would provide a good test to see how close we are to our goal of making it up to their level, and that game turned out to be a... hold on, let me check my notes here. A 5-2 thrashing by us against the mid-table Liga Portugal side.
What is this?
But the wins had to stop at some point, and Nacional de Madeira made sure of that. October would be a mixed bag, as the league saw us defeat Leiria thanks to an Archie Goodwin brace, but then fall short against Passos de Ferreira not long after that. Goodwin also brought along some of that magic to the Allianz Cup, as he scored 2 late-game goals and rolled us to a draw against Braga, a result that would eventually put us in the semifinals of the competition. With that in mind, the highlight of the month came after a cagey Taça de Portugal 3rd round bout versus Feirense, where no scoring of any kind happened until the extra halves, and we dragged this whole thing to penalties where cup keeper Nuno Silva did just enough to get a key save, and the boys didn't miss a single PK in order to will us to the 4th round. That would mean it'd be another Liga Portugal side in Vitória de Guimarães against us in the Taça. Archie Goodwin proceeds to celebrate the news by scoring 4 goals in a 6-2 win against AVS, but our next game around, Tondela finally took their revenge for the past 2 times we've kicked their butts in cup competitions, as we lost 2-1 to them. Not exactly the best result to have before going into the 4th round of the Taça de Portugal against the Liga Portugal side.
Oh!
Okay, this somehow just made that worse. And you can tell when the opposing side opens up scoring as Vitória de Guimarães did with a Juan Roman Zarza goal.
A few minutes later.
Turns out we just needed to bullshit our way into getting penalty kicks late in the second half, and that was enough to get União de Tomar into the 5th round. We then wrap up November with a win over Alverca SCAD before getting Nacional de Madeira in the draw for the 5th round of the Taça de Portugal, so we're at least avoiding the big three. Or rather, 2 of the big 3, as Benfica got eliminated by Sporting CP in the previous round. How do we follow a fairly successful 2 months? Well, losing to Vizela by conceding a really dumb penalty, having to rescue a draw against Porto's B team, and not even a convincing win over Desportivo Chaves is enough to wash the stink of conceding a 99th minute stoppage time goal to Benfica's B team, and then finding out we're getting their senior team in the Allianz Cup semifinals.
Flashback to the future!
Let's talk about other parts of January instead, like our draws against Académico de Viseu e Belenenses, or how we beat up Nacional da Madeira in the 5th round of the Taça de Portugal and are now getting Moreirense for the quarterfinals. Or also how we trash Feirense and Mafra with clean sheets and plenty of goals before the aforementioned Benfica game I dare not speak of. And how we beat up on Penafiel too, even though that one also led to some gruesome injuries in its aftermath. Hey look, we're in 3rd place. Not bad, right? Here's a couple more signings like defensive midfielder Wali Eldin Hadir, fullback Abubakar Abdullahi, and center back Chukwuebuka Anthony, just before the transfer deadline. We also sold Guy for £325, so we at least needed to fill one of the missing spots there. Our Taça de Portugal quarterfinal against Moreirense did see its fair share of action as we carried it into extra time, but giving up 2 goals in the second half of extra time, including the Lucas Ambrosio game winner, well, that's going to sink anyone's hopes and dreams. Still, a respectable set of appearances in both cups that now have come to an end. And thus, the focus now shifted in full towards Liga Portugal 2 and its 13 games left on the schedule. A 3-0 loss to Torriense isn't ideal, and neither is a Guilherme Mantuan injury, but we bounced back by beating Caldas 5-2 and then pulling off another win against Nacional da Madeira. Speaking of pulling things, we have got to figure out why everyone keeps pulling their ligaments this year. While the medical staff works overtime on that throughout March, we deal with a 3-1 loss to Leiria, lose our starting striker and top goal scorer for the next 5 to 6 weeks, but somehow levy that into a 3-2 comeback against Passos de Ferreira, a boring 0-0 draw against AVS, and as I realize we're the team with the most injuries across the league, well, Tondela takes advantage of that to beat us 3-1. On the bright side, União de Tomar is holding on to 3rd place, but Vizela, Desportivo Chaves, and the aforementioned Tondela are on our heels. So drawing 2-2 against Alverca to start April isn't quite giving us the leeway to fend off some of those challengers, but beating Vizela 2-1 most certainly will do that. The race for the top 3 spots in the league is only getting tighter, as 7 clubs in total have their puncher's chances at it, with 4 games left to go in the season. A draw against Porto's B team and then a loss to Desportivo Chaves are not stellar, but those losses don't hurt us as much somehow, due to results elsewhere going in our favor. Realizing what a golden opportunity we have within the final 2 games of the season, União de Tomar does find a way to beat Benfica's B team to set up a showdown against Académico de Viseu on the final day of the season. At this point, Nacional da Madeira has already secured the title, with Viseu and Tomar having the 2nd and 3rd place spots respectively. But Vizela is a point behind us, and if they beat Porto's B team, they can pass either us or Viseu for one of the promotion spots. So yeah, this last game of the season has a whole lot on the line and then some. That game started off on the worst possible note for União de Tomar, as after the first 20 or so minutes, they're down 3-1 and the visitors were giving them everything they could possibly handle. After a rather intense talk during halftime, The boys seemed to get it together as Wally Aldin Hadir and Jamilio Richter scored within 6 minutes of one another to make it a 3-3 tie. But after that, not a whole lot is going on here. That is until the 96th minute, where it's none other than Liga Portugal 2's leading scorer adding one more to the column and winning this game at the death for União de Tomar. The final week's games end up having us in 3rd place, which would normally mean having to play a 2-legged series against the 16th place in Liga Portugal. Except, not really, because in 2nd place in Liga Portugal 2 is Benfica's B team, which cannot gain promotion. Thus, the 2nd automatic promotion spot falls to 3rd place, and guess what, boys? We are headed to Liga Portugal next season. Much like the Liga 3's title race, this one was a bit on the butt-clenching hours during the last few weeks, but what can I say that hasn't already been said about Archie Goodwin this season? An absolute rising star in the Portuguese tiers with 24 total goals and 20 goals in Liga Portugal 2. He was the clear choice for Young Player of the Season by breaking the club record for most goals in a season outright. Even if it is an overachievement, União de Tomar will finally return to the top tier of Portuguese football for the first time since the 1975-76 season. After seeing our efforts throughout the past 3 years and the influx of money we're bound to have going forward, the board of directors made the decision to approve plans and secure a loan along with stadium sponsorships for the construction of the brand new Estádio União de Tomar. Lackluster name aside, it will be ready by the end of next season. So it's up to us to do everything in our power to stay up top in Liga Portugal and with it, greet our fans with a brand new stadium at the top level. Until then, I should check my inbox, lest I saw there was quite a few emails where... would you look at that? Garbage. 3 seasons, 3 promotions achieved in different ways, and finally, União de Tomar had returned to the first tier of Portuguese football after a 51-year absence. Having been the manager who achieved such a task, I ended up being flooded with quite a few job offers from various teams across Europe who wanted to interview me, but much like the Crystal Palace offer, I chose to decline them. I knew this task was not going to be an easy one, so I ended up going to a very specific place for advice, searching for and finding a man who had been the reason for FC Porto's success in recent years before his departure from it all.
Flashback.
Hey, so I just wanted to know, how do I succeed at this level and not turn into a complete fraud like you did?
Shut up, numpty. Get out of my house.
End of flashback.
That went about as well as expected. Even without the advice of that fraud, things were looking up. A new stadium is under construction, we're getting some good money for taking part in Liga Portugal, but it turns out that constructing a new stadium is expensive, and we're in the red to start the season.
We're not rich! We're broke!
So with what little transfer money we do have, we end up picking up winger Vando Felix at the end of his contract with Sporting CP, purchase winger Rodrigo Matos from Mafra, and then use the bits we have left on center back Gabriel Vareta from Palmeiras, both for his skill and as an excuse to give my beloved Alviverde more of my money. Those signings are enough to get us through our friendlies along with the first 2 phases of the Allianz Cup, where we thoroughly dismantled Tondela in the first phase with a 4-1 win and handled Caldas just fine with a 2-0 clean sheet. But those were second tier teams and we were now in the first tier. This was to be expected, just as it was expected to end up being sorted on a 3rd phase group with Moreirense and Braga. Those matchups do prepare us for the opening game of Liga Portugal, as União de Tomar is set to make a triumphant return to the Portuguese main stage against Estoril Praia. It is a game in which we score 2 goals in the first 10 minutes of the matchup and where everything looks to be going well.
That's a red card.
Estoril Praia promptly proceeds to use this to their advantage to score 3 unanswered goals. 2 of our starters end up injured at the tail end of this game, and we eventually lose 4-3 in our Liga Portugal debut. Not an ideal start, but it's only one game, and there were positive signs. But there were also negative signs, as a matchup against Sporting CP sees us lose by conceding a 90th minute winner. We have to then rescue a draw against CF Estrela Amadora, and while we do get our first win in Liga Portugal this season against Portimonense, that momentum gets promptly shut down by Moreirense with a 2-1 loss to them at their house. I may or may not have ended up panic buying fullback Apostolos Apostolopoulos just before that Moreirense loss due to factors, and then shipped off Ibrahim Sesse on loan due to the amount of absolute stinkers he's had in the past month.
What is this? For what? Why?
But we make some more purchases for reinforcements, although they won't be arriving until January due to end contract stuff in their respective leagues, so we'll talk about them in due time. If August was our rude welcome to Liga Portugal, September was only going to add on to that, as we had Benfica to start the month against at Estádio da Luz. Our past encounters against them have been anything but fun, and it was most likely that we would yet again suffer the agony of defeat. Wait, we beat him 2-1? What the hell? Oh, you're saying it cost us Guilherme Mantuan for 4 months due to a hip injury? And that while we get a narrow win against Sporting Clube Farense, we are also losing Aristide 1 for a month and a half, and following that up by getting trounced by Aruca, and then letting in another late game goal to lose to Moreirense for the second time, although that one is in the Allianz Cup. Cool. Yeah, fantastic.
We're not done yet.
It's around this time in which we get our Taça de Portugal third round match against 4th tier team Real Sport Clube for October, and the month itself is a mixed bag. While we keep Braga to a 0-0 draw and manage to barely beat another team that's a relegation candidate in CS Marítimo, it does take another Archie Goodwin masterclass to barely get past Real Sport Clube in the Taça de Portugal match. The cost of such a win is losing Brian Ferreira to a damage near cartilage for 2 months and Abubakar Abdullahi to sprain knee ligament in the exact same training session after that game. Look, I know the rule here is that sacrifices must be made, but even this is starting to borderline on ludicrous. Porto uses the tail end of October to remind us of our place in the pecking order as we lose 5-3 to them, and then Braga shows us that the 0-0 draw earlier in the month was nothing more than a fluke, as we lose 3-1 in the Allianz Cup game and are knocked out of the competition entirely.
Game over, yeah!
November comes along. Casa Pia are set to be our opponents in the 4th round of the Taça de Portugal, but against Boa Vista in Liga Portugal, a brace from Archie Goodwin isn't enough as we lose 3-2 thanks to a late game winner from Alexandre Ferreira. Following that loss with a draw against Vitória de Guimarães didn't inspire a lot of momentum going into the Taça de Portugal's 4th round match. Good thing that Australians are built different, because Archie Goodwin comes through clutch and scores the game winner to help União de Tomar advance in the 5th round of the Cup. But while they've had some success in the Cup, the top tier of Portuguese football strikes again as they lose 3-2 to Nacional da Madeira to wrap up November. There are only about 8 points separating 7th through 15th place, and União de Tomar is kinda smack dab in the middle of it. But their form hadn't exactly been inspiring. Their only match in December against Rio Ave ended up being a draw, but before that match even happened, I decided to do the one thing we could do to keep our players sharp throughout the month. We scheduled a bunch of friendlies against lower league teams on the cheap, and helped raise our self-esteem in the process. I'm not necessarily proud of it, but take a good look at January's schedule. It's going to be our busiest to date, and I'm not going to have our players go into it without any sharpness whatsoever. Speaking of January, remember those reinforcements I was talking about? Well, they have finally arrived. Former Urawa Red Diamond center back Irfan Fondi immediately found his way into the starting lineup upon arrival and helped us break a 5-game winless streak against Casa Pia in Liga Portugal. It's a key victory that sets the tone for the rest of the month throughout the Liga Portugal games, as we stayed unbeaten for most of the month with victories and draws alike. It's very clear at this point that they have our number and they have it in spades. Additionally, we did sign former NAC Breda winger Adam Cade, but he spent the entirety of January helping Palestine get to the semifinals of the AFC Asian Cup. That said, the 5th round of the Taça de Portugal was up next, and it started off incredibly, as we went ahead to a 2-0 commanding lead. But to their credit, Lenk FC Vilaverdense came back to tie it up in the second half to take the game into extra time. Chances came aplenty for both teams throughout the extra 30 minutes of football, but just when it looks like we're headed in the penalty kicks, it's none other than Vando Felix who manages an absolute banger of a shot to turn it around and make it a 3-2 win.
There! It's over! It's done! We're safe! Oh, son of a bitch!
So, not only do we get Benfica in the 6th round of the Taça de Portugal, we get to face them twice in a 3-day span to start the month of February.
Flashback to the future!
And yeah, it didn't go all that well. Is this a good time to mention that Benfica got Romelu Lukaku at some point during this past transfer window? In general, this season has been a wake-up call that we're going to need to make some improvements on just about every aspect of our team. But for now, we move on to the rest of the Liga Portugal games, as we do bounce back from the Benfica losses with a sound 3-0 win over Farense, then avenge our loss to Aroca earlier in the season with a 3-1 win to wrap up February. Sporting CP promptly reminds me of the packing order to start March by beating us 3-0 and making it look easy. A week later, a reckless play from a Braga defender gets him sent off, and we're able to capitalize on it with a 2-0 win, although losing to an already on its way to relegation CS Marítimo immediately after that isn't quite the best look. We do manage to beat Boa Vista 2-1 to start April, and that leaves us with 6 games left in the year, and right now, fluctuating between 8th and 10th place. Also, Archie Goodwin is only 6 goals behind Romelu Lukaku for top goal scorer in the league. Not too shabby. In our next game against Vitória de Guimarães, thanks to Aristide One's brace, including a late game winner, we sealed the deal and have officially avoided relegation. So it's par for the course that Nacional de Madeira once again smacks us around and we lose 4-2, followed by Porto winning the title outright in their 2-1 win against us the following game. But also, they now have Eric Dyer on their roster. So who's the real loser here?
I'm a loser. Yep, still a loser.
The losing skid continues with a loss to Famalicão, but in the final 2 games of the season in May, we do manage to collect whatever's left of our pride for the year and beat Rio Ave in the last game they're playing at their current stadium before they move to a new ground, and then beat Casa Pia to wrap up the year in 10th place. Overall, this was a tough year. We have some wins that we can hang our hats on, but ultimately, a mid-table finish was the best case scenario for this current roster, and by our board's expectations, we've yet again overachieved. Sure, we did it by basically tackling the ever-living bejesus out of everything that moved on the pitch, but the adage is simple. Sacrifices must be made. Survival at this level and seeing another season in Liga Portugal will be essential moving forward, as we've seen our revenue increase dramatically overall compared to last year, and with a brand new stadium that will be ready to go starting next season, things are looking up for us. Well, at least the delay is only until October. One season after returning to the top tier of Portuguese football, we managed to keep União de Tomar within the Liga Portugal with a surprising 10th place finish. Our stature grew a little bit due to that, but my focus was in building on the campaign that we put together last year and to continue our reputation as overachievers.
Then you better get started.
That meant letting a lot of players that came up with us through the ranks be released in a free agency and bringing in capable players that can handle this level while spending within our means. So that meant more free transfers such as the likes of winger Michal Kohut, midfielder Taylor Charters, and striker Josu Merino. We have also been keeping track of our Star Academy graduate Marco Tavares, who had a successful loan stint last season with Pero Pinheiro and would play out on loan for one more season with Caldas before we integrate him into the senior team. But otherwise, there's not too much movement as we head into the new season, trusting our core players from last year like Aristide Wam, Thiago Ferreira, Irfan Kandi, Adam Cade, Rodrigo Matos, Rafa Pinto, and our star striker, Archie Goodwin. We got our first phase draw of the Allianz Cup against Famalicão, and we started the season with a big 2-1 win over them before getting Arouca in the second phase. It was a much tougher outing as it was a 1-1 draw that led all the way to penalty kicks. Thankfully, we survived those with a 4-3 win in them to move on to the third phase of the Allianz Cup, as we sold off some of our last Season 1 stalwarts in Arthur Souza and Anderson Filho before getting the third phase draw with Braga and Farense in our group. This led to the start of the Liga Portugal season, where Rafa Pinto's late goal against Moreirense helped us rescue a point to open up the season. It's a somewhat similar situation against Nacional da Madeira for another draw, and then CF Estrela Amadora proceeded to demolish us at their own house as we lost 3-0. Much like last season, it's not the best start, but we've got plenty of time to bounce. While we do rally around Archie's unfortunate injury with a 5-0 win over Feirense and somehow scraping by Casa Pia to wrap up August, Rafa Pinto getting injured with a hernia for the next month meant that I had some work ahead of me in the summer transfer window deadline.
Several days later.
Look, we'll have better luck in January. It's totally going to be fine until then. Don't look, but we've won 4 in a row. We've got all of the momentum on our side in this upcoming matchup against Oh wow! Some teams just have your number sometimes. Thankfully, a distraction came along in the third round of the Taça de Portugal against 4th tier Esporte União Sintrense. While we won that 2-1, the 4th tier side came at us with everything they had in the process. Additionally, Waliodin Kidir pulled his knee ligaments in training a few days later after that game, and dear mother of God, can we just stop with the injuries already? We did get back on the winning track against Historio Praia with a 3-0 win, and oh, would you look at that? Rafa Pinto's injured again!
Stop it!
The bad news kept on coming as Braga won another game in the Allianz Cup and thus were automatically knocked out of the third phase, and Porto reminded us of the pecking order once again as we lost 2-1 to wrap up October. Speaking of October, wasn't something important supposed to happen this month? Estádio União de Tomar was finally open after an initial delay in construction, and on his return to the lineup, Archie Goodwin made history by scoring the first ever goal within it. Sure, we drew 1-1 against Vitória de Guimarães, but it was the beginning of a new era for the team. We took this performance and built on it with a dominant 6-0 win in the Taça de Portugal 4th round against lower tier club Cirzense, and our round of 16 draw in the aftermath would prove favorable as we got matched up against Campeonato de Portugal side Amarante. However, it's a rule of thumb at this point that we can't always have good things as Benfica comes into our new home and kills the vibe completely. Things also looked dire in the aftermath of that game against Boa Vista, but Archie Goodwin decided to do his best Greg Jennings impression and score 2 goals late in the game to finally give União de Tomar their first win at the new stadium. That led us into December, and we got the news that a whole new president got elected. Just to then get a memo that there are no plans to provide the club with any investment at this time.
Cool.
While we opened the month with a rough loss to Sporting CP, we do bounce back with a win against Portimonense, draw against Feirense in an Allianz Cup game to get our paycheck for coming second place, then yet again end up eating a rough, close loss to Rio Ave where we surrendered 3 goals in 5 shots. That led me to promptly look into the transfer market and find a loan deal for veteran goalie Sergi Puig from Las Palmas because we are somehow in the top half of the table and right now, Thiago Gonçalves ain't cutting the mustard. Of course, we can't start the year without injuries as Irfan Fondi is now out for most of January with pulled knee ligaments. As I yet again have to have a calm and civilized discussion with our medical staff, Aristide Wam got us through the round of 16 in the Taça de Portugal against Amarante with a goal in stoppage time. That puts us in a quarterfinal match against Vitória de Guimarães come February, but in the meantime, a win against Famalicão to start January's games did have us just 3 points away from 4th place Braga. We took this to heart as the team did go unbeaten through the January stretch, the key highlight out of those close victories being none other than our academy star boy, Marco Tavares. He'd been playing so well at Caldas that I made the executive call to bring him back from loan, and he rewarded the team accordingly with a goal in his debut against Feirense, and then he got another one against Casa Pia. That wasn't the only thing we did at the tail end of January, as I actually did find some semblance of a good deal on the free transfer market by bringing in an English striker in Jude Soonsup-Bell. Given what happened earlier this year with Goodwin's injury, I'm just not taking any chances. Plus, he can play on the wings too, which is pretty nice for squad depth.
Nice!
The January stretch in the league brought us to 4th place in the table, but February's main focus, at first, was on the quarterfinals of the Taça de Portugal against Vitória de Guimarães, and that would be the defining game of the season thus far. Archie Goodwin and Michal Kohut opened up the scoring, but Vitória de Guimarães bounced back with 2 goals in 5 minutes late in the game to take it to extra time. A winner could not be found in 120 minutes, and so we went to penalties. No one could miss, as all 5 main takers on both sides converted. That took us to sudden death, and the next 4 shooters did not miss either. Then, the 10th round comes, and defender Lumbar Delova does not make it. Vitória de Guimarães somehow decided their goalie should be their 10th kicker, and Alim Papa made the save to keep this whole thing alive. Papa converts his PK as the 11th man, and Grujic does the same, as we now have gone through the entire 11 players on the field, and that means we're swinging it back around to the top of the order. Archie Goodwin coolly and calmly scores his PK, and now the pressure's on Vitória de Guimarães as Adrian Marin has to score to keep this going. And Alim Papa makes the game-winning save, as União de Tomar advances in dramatic fashion to the Taça de Portugal semi-final. 11-10 in penalty kicks. A game unlike anything I have seen in my time. And our reward for it is a semi-final matchup against Porto.
Oh, come on, man, I can't have in this house!
Oh, right, and Alim Papa basically sacrificed himself for the cause, as a broken wrist is gonna have him out for just about the rest of the season.
What is it?
Our exhausted team does play Varzim to a boring 0-0 draw at their home 3 days later, but the unbeaten streak continues for February as we shut out Arouca with a 3-0 win. A Rafa Pinto hat-trick is enough to get through Estoril Praia in a 3-2 win, and then the craziest result of the month happens as Adam Cade and Archie Goodwin both score within a minute of each other to somehow secure a 2-2 draw at Estádio do Dragão in the first leg of the Taça de Portugal semi-final. The only sour note of February happens to be Nacional da Madeira ending our unbeaten streak as we lose 2-0 to them on their ground. The start of March does set us up for possibly the key matchup in our Liga Portugal campaign, as we get Braga at Estádio União de Tomar, as only 2 points separate our teams and are the difference between 4th and 5th place. After some adjustments in the second half, we scored 3 unanswered goals to win the game 3-1, as we kept the 2-point advantage over Braga in the race for that last European spot. The momentum of that win was so crazy that we managed to even go into Estádio da Luz and score a pair of late game goals to draw against Benfica as well. Although after that performance, a costly red card early on in the next game does see us eventually fall short of the mark to Porto in the league with a 2-1 loss that causes us to fall to 5th place on the table. Thankfully, we started April by overcoming Vitória de Guimarães and get right back on that 4th place spot as now Nacional da Madeira is also chasing after it. A draw against Sporting CP keeps us in place on the league table, but the focus would shift once more to the Taça de Portugal, as Porto would come into our house for the second leg of the semi-final. It did not start off spectacularly, as Evan Nilsson scored in the 24th minute for Porto. 10 minutes later, Aristide One then took matters into his own feet with a long-distance banger to tie it up 1-1. But the turning point of the game came from a free kick given 25 yards from goal. And Thiago Ferreira absolutely got every bit of it, scoring one of União de Tomar's best goals of the entire season in the process. The team then held their ground, and to the absolute shock of most pundits, we held on to the 2-1 victory to punch our ticket to the Taça de Portugal final. It was a historical achievement just to get to this point with the club. It also gave us a second lifeline in terms of European qualification, since the winner of the Taça de Portugal technically got that spot. But since that trophy bounces around between Benfica, Porto, and maybe sometimes the Sporting CP or Braga, well, that usually means the 4th place team on the table ends up having it gifted to them. With 4 games left in Liga Portugal, we had to take care of the matches we could, and while a draw against Boa Vista, plus an injury to Jude Sousa Bell was not an ideal start in this scenario, we recovered by beating Famalicão 2-1.
Unit lost.
Oh, come on!
The Fates may have tried to beat us into submission, but we would not go gently into that good night, as Marco Tavares' brace against Portimonense secured a clutch 2-1 victory, get us back into 4th place due to Braga and Nacional da Madeira dropping points the following day. This would set us up for the final game of the season against Rio Ave, where in order to maintain 4th place, nothing but a victory would do. We were off to an absolutely terrible start as André Neves scored a brace in the first half, and we trailed by 2 before Joaquim Panicelli scored in the 44th minute to keep us within 1 going into the half. Our fighting spirit would be tested in the second half, but Rodrigo Matos tied it up 2-2 on a penalty kick at the 76th minute mark. But a draw would not be enough to see us through, and it would be the 19-year-old Marco Tavares who would score the game-winning goal and guarantee European football for União de Tomar next season. And now, all that was left was a chance at the club's first major trophy in the finals of the Taça de Portugal against SCL Benfica, who ended up losing out on the Liga Portugal title to Porto again, due to goal differential, in a season where Romelu Lukaku was the league's top goal scorer with 25 goals.
Flashback to the future!
Shameful display!
At least, we can sit back and enjoy a tremendous season overall that exceeded expectations with a guaranteed spot for qualifiers in the UEFA Europa Conference League. And while our budget was limited compared to some of the clubs who would be in this competition, 564k for a transfer budget was more than what we usually get in the first place. So we're gonna make use of it, because now that we've got a new stadium and are among Portugal's top teams, it's time we make sure the bank account reflects that too, and nothing brings in the money like European football. A 4th place finish in Liga Portugal with União de Tomar was not only our best season ever, but it would also mark the first season in which this 100-plus-year-old club would play continental football, as we qualified for the UEFA Europa Conference League. With our biggest transfer budget to date, we still did our due diligence while strengthening our side for the upcoming season, opting to mostly bring in end-of-contract players such as center-back Fernando Somolinos and midfielder Victor Luturi. But after failed negotiations to bring in keeper Sergi Puig on a permanent basis, we ended up looking elsewhere, and that led our scouts to South America, which then led to us paying 450k for fullback Ricardo Rojas from Venezuela, and then 105k for keeper Federico Gomes Guerra from Argentina. Now, how did we manage all of that on our transfer budget, you ask?
โห ผ่อนได้ไหม
Anywho, we would be busy from the get-go after coming back from the off-season, as our qualifying first-round matches in the Europa Conference League would be against Scotland's Hibernian. While I prepared for those games, I did fend off a job offer from Fiorentina.
Nope.
Thus, we went in the Easter road to play the first leg of our first-round qualifier against Hibs, and the game itself was a bit crazy, as it ended up in a 3-3 draw where Hibs were able to use the home crowd to come back into it late. After the draw in the first leg, we sent Ismail out on loan so he could get actual playing time, sold Vando Felix, Gerald Marcu, and Gabriel Tigrão, then also ensured another end-of-contract signing in Sverre Angul Mikkelsen, who would arrive come January. The second leg of the first round qualifier against Hibernian put the pressure on us to deliver at home against a fairly established Scottish side. Turns out they're really bad outside of Scotland, because we beat them soundly 3-1 to advance to the second round of qualifiers in the Conference League. That would put us on a crashing course against Norwegian side Strømsgodset, and it's a similar story to the first qualifying round, where we draw the first leg on the road, and then just absolutely run roughshod on the second leg at home, including Marco Tavares getting a hat-trick during it. It is in between those games where we got some big news, as after some scouting and tough negotiations, we ended up coming to an agreement of 250k to grab 19-year-old South Korean striker Cho Sang-yeon from Incheon United to strengthen the forward core. He would be able to prove himself promptly, as the third round European qualifier matches were set against KRC Genk in Belgium. The combination of injuries and a red card in a close game to team captain Fernando Somolinos ended up being the cause of a 2-1 loss in Belgium, and with the pressure mounting on us to get it done at home. But yet again, Estádio União de Tomar would prove to be a fortress, as 9,000 strong showed up to watch us beat the brakes out of the Belgian club in a 6-2 dominant win, where Cho Sang-yeon dished out 3 assists for player of the match honors in his first start with the club. So with that in mind, we only had one more round to survive before getting into the league phase of the UEFA Europa Conference League outright. So, who is it gonna be? Wait, time out for a moment.
Internazionale.
What are you all doing here? How bad was your season last year? How bad are we on the coefficient table as a country to get you in the 4th round?
Questions for later.
We do host the first leg against Inter Milan at home, and if anything, a sold-out crowd is at least guaranteeing us a nice gate record, but in terms of results, it goes better than expected, but it's definitely still a loss. Only 1-0 though, so maybe this is salvageable at the San Siro. Of course, it's a huge challenge, especially since they have known Argentine menace Diego Simeone managing their club and a talented roster. In spite of those things, we've come this far into the Europa Conference League qualifiers. We might as well give it our best shot as we walk into the bright lights under the Italian night sky, ready as we will ever be to do this thing. Marco Tavares promptly steps up in the first 15 minutes and evens it all up. And, well, we kinda gotta fight for our lives for the next 75 minutes. In the minutes after that in extra time, and yes, this one is going to penalty kicks, where... Look, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. We lost 3-1 because we missed the first 3 out of 4 PKs of the bunch, and before you ask me about the first penalty taker, this is a good time to remind you all that Federico Gomes-Gerf, our starting keeper, is legitimately our best penalty taker. He just got unlucky, as our European adventure came to an end. On the bright side, we did make a decent chunk of change out of the Europa Conference League qualifying run and could now solely focus on the Portuguese domestic league and cups. So our first 4 games in Liga Portugal that were sprinkled between the Conference League qualifiers didn't go too bad. 2 draws and a pair of wins. Before heading into September, we end up picking up Dutch fullback Eliano Reinders from PEC Zwolle before the summer transfer window closes, before spending most of the month playing Pictionary, as we get draws against Braga and Sporting CP, before giving FC Porto their first loss of the Liga Portugal season, while remaining undefeated in our first 7 games. All in all, not too bad. Also, that makes it 13 games unbeaten in Liga Portugal dating back to last season in April, so we're doing something right here. That trend continues through October, as outside of a draw to Benfica, we come out victorious in our next 5 games with clean sheets in all of them. That includes our first games of the Taça de Portugal against Vilar de Perdizes and the Allianz Cup against Gil Vicente, where Archie Goodwin delivers the goods at the last minute to win it. We got our 4th round Taça de Portugal draw against Luletano and beat Estoril Praia 1-0 to start November before seeing the run of form we had finally snapped away by Vitória de Guimarães, who handed us our first loss of the season outside of European competitions. But to their credit, the boys recovered with a solid win over Feirense, and while we get a tough matchup against Luletano, Rodrigo Matos comes clutch with a 92nd minute goal to punch our ticket into the 5th round of the Taça de Portugal against Braga. We wrap up the year with a pair of draws in the league against Portimonense and Vizela, defeat Rio Ave in the Allianz Cup to win our group, and head to the semi-final against Sporting CP, but on the bright side, Sver Angus Mikkelsen is arriving in early January to help us with goalie depth behind Thiago Gonçalves, but still, it's a rough loss and we feel it in full as Braga comes back from behind and beats us in the 5th round of the Taça de Portugal. A draw against Nacional da Madeira follows, but against a mid-table CF Estrela Amadora, we do manage a dominant 5-1 win to continue holding on to a top 4 spot in the Liga Portugal table. That led to a showdown against 5th place Famalicão with all of the dramatics, as they thought they salvaged the point with a goal from Alpha Sanka in the 95th minute, only for Judson Sapel to get the actual game winner in the 96th minute. While that win keeps us in the top 4 of Liga Portugal, the Allianz Cup semi-final against Sporting CP comes 2 days later, and while they do score early with Ricardo Calafiori, União de Tomar manages to make a comeback with Mikhail Kohut's goal early in the second half, and then none other than Cho Sang-yoon, scoring one of his biggest goals for the club so far in the 88th minute, to send us to the Allianz Cup final for the very first time against FC Porto. Porto. I know we haven't talked about you much, but it is true that while Benfica has been my perpetual pain in the ass, you have actually been the dominating power in Portugal over the last couple of years. You've won the Liga Portugal 3 times in the past 4 seasons, 2 Taça de Portugal trophies in the last 4 seasons, but you haven't actually won the Allianz Cup since the 2022-23 season. And we're kind of in the way of you getting a domestic double again, like last year's whole Taça de Portugal situation. But before we get Porto at the end of the month, we use the 2 league games against Nacional da Madeira, again, and Rio Ave to prepare for the big showdown, with mixed results. While the Allianz Cup isn't viewed in the same manner as the Taça de Portugal or Liga Portugal, for a club like ours that hasn't won a major trophy at this level, this means something to us, damn it.
You know what I mean? I'm from around the way. I'm leaving with something.
Also, the moment doesn't feel as overwhelming after our experience last season in the big final of the Taça. And while we do concede the first goal to Martin Baturina, we end up scoring 2 goals in 2 minutes via Adam Cade tying it up, and then Archie Goodwin giving us the lead. Unfortunately for us, Fernando Somolinos ended up getting his 2nd yellow and a red card to go with that before the end of the first half. Granted, we somehow drew a penalty kick and saw that converted, but a 3-1 lead with only 10 men? That wasn't safe. And Porto promptly pulled it back to a 3-3 game shortly thereafter. Thus, we basically held on for dear life from the 70th minute mark, and via defending plus luck, we managed to drag it to penalty kicks. The first round would see Thiago Gonçalves promptly save Carlos Soler's PK attempt. With Taylor Charters converting his kick, that immediately gave us the advantage. The next round would see the takers on both sides convert their kicks, with Mora converting his to tie things up for Porto in the third round, and then Marco Tavares had his PK saved by Diogo Costa. It was all even once again as Ruben Alves stepped up, and Thiago Gonçalves came through with another huge save. Archie Goodwin proceeds to score on this penalty kick to give us the advantage, then Sforza evens it up with the fifth kick for Porto. Thus, it would fall unto the feet of Adam Cade on whether this would continue or if União de Tomar would make history. And he does so, sending Diogo Costa the other way and winning União de Tomar their first ever major Portuguese trophy in the Allianz Cup. It may not yield a European spot, but it pays quite nicely and oh, who am I kidding? It's our first big league trophy! Although the caveat here is that because this game happened on the same day as the winter transfer deadline, I ended up declining FC Lorient's transfer bid for Jude Soonsapel, and he was not very happy about it. But after a brief conversation, I promised him that I would sell him if we got a good transfer fee for him instead of whatever Lorient was offering. Riding the high of the Allianz Cup win, we can now solely focus on the Liga Portugal campaign as we draw against Boa Vista, find a pair of second half goals against Braga, then manage to rescue a late game draw against Sporting CP via Marco Tavares scoring a clutch goal when we need him most. Thank the gods it's only for 2 to 3 weeks, but this whole pattern is starting to get concerning. Oh, right, we end up starting March with a win over Vitória de Guimarães, then scored 3 goals in the second half to beat Porto 4-2 in our next game, and because we're equal opportunity haters of the first and second place spots above us, we somehow managed to beat Benfica too. A stomping of Casa Pia at the end of the month keeps us safely in third place and within striking range of 2 of the country's big 3 with only 6 games to go in the season. April starts with a pair of wins against Tondela and Desportivo Chaves, but Estoril Praia does put a damper on things by dragging us to a 1-1 draw, and Feirense almost does the same, if not for a late game winner from Irfan Fanji. However, with only 2 games to go in May and a draw against Portimonense, even a gutsy win against Vizela with Federico Gomes-Gerf scores with the game-winning penalty kick isn't enough to catch up to Porto or Benfica, as Porto falls 2-1 to Sporting CP and then Benfica beats Boa Vista to win the Liga Portugal by a single point. Our efforts to hang strong throughout the year and get another top 4 finish means that we will once again be competing in the UEFA Europa Conference League qualifiers next season. The arrivals of players like Federico Gomes-Gerf, Ricardo Rojas, and Cho Sang-yun have made us a stronger club along with Marco Tavares becoming our rock in the attacking midfield, earning him both Fans Player of the Season and Young Player of the Season honors. Add that Allianz Cup win to it, and this has been an incredibly successful season. So successful that the board of directors decided to begin work to enlarge Estádio União de Tomar to have another 5,000 or so seats built into it. But the problem, yet again, is that this is going to take about a year or so to complete. And that means we're playing away from our new home for at least the entirety of next season. But we'll get to that right now. A new season also meant a new budget, and with it, new signings. A deal that was in the works since around the trade deadline last season finally comes through, as the incredibly talented fullback Saif Jassin comes to us after we paid a humble 195,000 transfer fee to acquire him. We also somehow managed to bring in an incredible right-back prospect in Latvian Nikita Michelsons into the fold, along with the likes of veteran midfielder Luka Lukanic and attacking midfielder Nikola Jojic on free transfers, plus center-back Bradel Kiwa on a 59,000 transfer fee. As you can see, we do have quite a lot of arrivals, and I kept myself busy with that. But that is because we also have had a big departure. After many successful seasons as a part of our humble club, Archie Goodwin accepted an offer to go to Sunderland in the English Championship. 2.5 million was the transfer fee, our biggest sale to date, and with it, we said goodbye to our Australian wonder. And we also managed to cash in on Thiago Gonçalves and Victor Loturi's Allianz Cup winning runs and sold them for profit. Oh, we also managed to secure an incredible kit sponsorship with Samsung for the next 2 seasons, and that's mainly on the back of Cho Sung-yoon's popularity skyrocketing between both his time in friendlies for the South Korean national team and TV show appearances in his homeland, spreading the good word of his life in Portugal, the city of Santarém, and União de Tomar as a club. That bit of good news was preceded by the UEFA Europa Conference League qualifying first round matches being set, and our draw would see us go up against Ireland's St. Patrick's Athletic. And St. Pat's Athletic ended up going to the woodshed in the process, as we dominated them 5-1 in the first leg at home, then added insult to injury with a 4-2 win in their own house to move on to the second round against Turkish side Beşiktaş. The Black Eagles would prove to be a lot tougher, as it took a late-game goal from Somolinos to help us win the first leg 3-2, and we were headed to Turkey for the second leg shortly after. But rather than just waiting on the Turkish crowd to overwhelm us, a quick goal from Marco Tavares and a PK goal from Gomes Gerf in the first 10 minutes were more than enough to settle that crowd, as we scored 4 unanswered and went on to win 4-2, making it 7-4 on the aggregate to move on to the third qualifying round. After refusing an interview with Marseille for their manager position, I then found out we were getting FC Basel 1893 for said third round. There was also a side note that our Allianz Cup group would see us with 2 second division teams, so it's a sign that good things are on the horizon. I'm just gonna move on to the Basel games before my mouth gets us in more trouble. In the first leg, Basel scored a pair of goals within minutes of our first goal to ensure them a 2-1 win on their ground. But throughout these qualifiers dating back to last year, we've always been a much stronger team when playing in Portugal. We proved as much, turning around the aggregate score with a 2-0 win in the second leg to eliminate Basel, moving forward to the fourth and final qualifying round of the Europa Conference League, where we would get AS Monaco. Which is a tough draw, don't get me wrong, but it isn't Inter Milan levels of difficult. For one, these guys play in a league where the true battle is for second through fourth, since PSG wins Ligue 1 every single year. But in the meantime, we do have our first couple of Liga Portugal games to kick off the season, and with the mixed results in those, there is a certain someone we need to talk about. Estevão William.
Huh?
In this universe, the Palmeiras wonder kid was held on to for dear life by the club and somehow, someway, barely even used. So after some finagling and dealing around, I managed to negotiate a loan to bring him into the club for the course of the season to help shore up our attacking midfield. We would soon head to France for the first leg against Monaco, and to their credit, they held us scoreless in a lopsided game. The problem was, they only scored 1 goal in said game to win it. And we were heading back to Portugal for the second leg. So, AS Monaco proved they were who we thought they were, as in the second leg, Marco Tavares scored a hat-trick and we won 4-2, sending Monaco back to the
country of baguette. He said, we merchants. That's so rude.
And with it, we survived a grueling 2 months of matches to make it into the UEFA Europa Conference League outright.
Well, this calls for a celebration.
We promptly get that fixture list and well, Brighton, Lille, and Real Sociedad are going to be heavy trials, but I'm confident we can get results against the rest and at least get into the knockout playoff round. With July and August wrapped up, the transfer deadline for the summer is upon us. We bring in Ibrahim Kamara on a free transfer for goalie depth, and also find a Thai winger in Sarawut Saleh, whose skill set is interesting enough to pay a $175,000 transfer fee for his services prior to the transfer window's closure. We then move on to September's games, where we win our next 4 games straight in Liga Portugal in rather decisive fashion, and that gives us plenty of momentum going into our UEFA Europa Conference League debut against Brighton. That game ends up being a rude reminder that there's still levels to all of this, as Brighton wins 1-0, but in very, very convincing fashion. So to make ourselves feel better, we use the game against Desportivo Chaves in the Allianz Cup to drown our sorrows, as Estevão gets his first hat-trick with the club, and we win dominantly. October is a mixed bag, as we lost to Tondela in a rather embarrassing fashion, but then beat Varzim in the 3rd round of the Taça de Portugal, only to then get FC Porto in the 4th round. So, guys, no hard feelings about last season's Allianz Cup final, right? Right?
Flashback to the future!
Huh. Well, that sucked. But certainly they didn't take it that personal, right? Anyways, where was I? Oh, yeah. Let's focus on what's going on with the Europa Conference League. After the announcement of the match against Porto in the Taça, we did go to Switzerland and did manage to come out victorious with a 2-1 win against Young Boys. In November, we first hosted Lille in a game that ended up being 5-4, with Rodrigo Matos scoring the eventual game winner after Marco Tavares tied it all up. While we lost against Real Sociedad at the end of November, we can hold our heads high in that it was a much better performance than most expected us to give against the Spanish side. From there, Derry City and Slovatsko did prove to be the easier matches we'd gotten in the league phase cycle, as we dispatched them 3-0 and 3-2 respectively, with goal contributions from multiple players on our lineup. That would be enough to meet my expectations to have us go into the knockout playoff round later on in February. So, we'll check back on this portion in due time, since Liga Portugal games and the Allianz Cup have all been happening in between all these matches. Our form was a mixed bag in November, as our only win in the month turned out to be against Lille, with a Porto draw and then a 3-2 loss to Benfica in the Liga Portugal, the aforementioned 3-2 loss in the Taça de Portugal, and then a draw to Varzim in the Allianz Cup. But we did have the better record on our group, so that meant we were moving on to the semifinals, where we would get Benfica as our opponents.
God damn it!
Anyhow, our form in December was much better between the 2 Europa Conference League wins and beating the likes of Boa Vista, Vitória de Guimarães, and Estoril Praia in Liga Portugal, along with rescuing a draw against Braga via a Cho Sang-yoon goal in the 91st minute. We did look like a team that was playing Drawosaurus for most of January, however, as draws against Nacional da Madeira, Sporting CP, and Famalicão happened before we finally snapped that streak against Rio Ave, and just in time for the Allianz Cup semi-final against Benfica to boot. A game in which statistically, we should not have won. And yet, Cho Sang-yoon managed to get the only goal in the entire game at the 82nd minute, and with it, União de Tomar was headed to their 2nd straight Allianz Cup final against FC Porto.
Oh no, not these guys again!
You know, I am starting to think they did take last year personally. And we don't have too long after the semi-final to prepare either, as the Allianz Cup final is set to happen 3 days after our bout against Benfica. Given Porto's penchant for playing the 4-4-2 and just making me think they're blatant terrorists for doing so, I ended up shifting our tactics as well as to try and counter the formation outright. And to be fair, it was sort of working at first. We were getting more shots on goal, better XG, making sure their chances weren't so clear, and then the dam broke, as Ansu Fati found Jonah Kusiasade for the first goal of the game in the 76th minute. Try as we might, we could not get a tying goal, and FC Porto then raised their first Allianz Cup in many, many years. You got revenge for last season. Are you happy now, you Kuninga put you up to this, didn't he?
No comment. Shut up.
24 hours later.
Okay, so this takes us to the winter transfer deadline, as we say our goodbyes to Adam Cade, selling him to SJK in Finland for $185,000, before sending a few players on loan across Europe for the rest of the season. Additionally, we complete the purchase of Colombian defensive midfielder Clyde Rosero right before the transfer window closes. Shortly after the deadline, the Europa Conference League knockout playoff round matches are drawn and will be facing Croatian side NK Osijek in them. Thanks to a strong league form in the month of February thus far, we do take that momentum to smash Osijek in both legs of the knockout playoff round to advance with some ease to the round of 16, where we would then be drawn against Villarreal from Spain. While we are unbeaten in February and are within striking distance of first place in Liga Portugal, the focus for March would be on taking down Villarreal. The first leg would be in Portugal, and with it, we played a game very similar to that against Lille earlier in the season. Plenty of goals would be scored from both sides, but the difference between both clubs started to show as we let a 4-2 lead slip, with Villarreal scoring 2 goals in 2 minutes in the latter portion of the second half. A 4-4 aggregate score going into Spain meant the slate was clean and anything could happen. But once again, the continental stage proved too big as Fabio Blanco scored in the 69th minute.
Nice.
And with a 1-0 loss, we were eliminated from the UEFA Europa Conference League. All things considered, I think we did our usual brand of surprising everyone with overachieving in terms of results, but I don't know, man. The game against Villarreal was there for the taking, and you just never know if you're going to get another shot at it anytime soon. While we do end up with another impressive unbeaten streak during the rest of the Liga Portugal season in between the Villarreal games and its aftermath, it's a very similar story to our league campaign last season. We got some signature wins in the process, but too many draws throughout the season hold us back from getting any further than 3rd place in the league table. Yes, this will mean that we're yet again headed to the UEFA Europa Conference League qualifying rounds next season, and that is a good thing. But watching this season as Porto does win the domestic treble for the first time since the 2010s, it does give me something to think about. But that will come in due time, because really, this was another great year for us. We've secured some incredible young players for years to come, brought in some great loanees. Cho Sang-yun and Marco Tavares took the next step in their careers as they carried the team's goal scoring. Luka Lukanic became a fan favorite almost instantly with his solid play and penchant for goal scoring as a defensive midfielder. And for our 7th year in charge, we've built another stepping stone on our path to become one of the best teams in Portugal. And this next season could be our best one yet. It wasn't long to be back at the club from a short off-season, as we decided to actually extend Judson Saptel's deal for another 3 seasons because, well, depth for all the competitions that we have to play is essential. We also gave contract extensions to Federico Gomes-Guerre, Ricardo Rojas, and Nikola Jojic to help with deterring interest from other European teams. We do sell Ibrahim Kamara for a profit to PAOK, as Ver Mikkelsen is good enough to be our cup goalkeeper moving forward. But the most important move in our off-season so far is the fact that the expansion for Estádio União de Tomar is now complete.
Look at this! Look at this! It's perfect!
It's now an all-seater stadium that can accommodate over 14,000 spectators, and that's a pretty nifty milestone for the club in that we're going to be able to host our continental competition games here going forward. This is around the time that Borussia Dortmund comes knocking on my door for a job interview, but for the umpteenth time, I'm not interested in any other club than this one. What do I look like? A fraud?
What is this?
Anyways, one of our focuses this year is to once again return to the league phase of the UEFA Europa Conference League, and to do that, we've got qualifiers to get through. Although we are handed a rather fortunate first round draw against San Marinese's side Penarosa, who we do handle quite handily in both legs with a 3-1 win at home, and then a 1-0 win on the road to advance, getting Ireland's Shamrock Rovers in the second qualifying round. To add on to the depth of our lineup for the upcoming league games and cups, I do also strike a deal with Canadian Premier League team York United to bring Kevin Dos Santos back to his homeland for 140k. Dos Santos would make an immediate impact by scoring 26 seconds into his debut, and Cho Sang-yon would add a hat-trick to complete the absolute demolition of Shamrock Rovers in the first leg with a 4-1 win. That made the second leg much more bearable to rotate some of the squad and still come out of it with a 1-1 draw to win the aggregate and head to the third qualifying round, where we would get the Faroese football club NC Runavik. I probably butchered that name completely, but we're gonna roll with it regardless. They are a semi-pro club, and it does show, as we arguably have the easiest two legs of our qualifying rounds yet, as we beat them soundly 5-0 in our own stadium, then win 5-0 again, except in their own house this time around. In between these two games, we do end up selling Mikhail Kohut for 575k, then bring in a free transfer in veteran David Pereira da Costa, because while we do have a nice young core of players, we need some elderly statesmen too to balance things out just a little bit. However, the fourth qualifying round would present our biggest challenge yet for the third straight year, as we would be paired against RB Leipzig of the Bundesliga to win our way into the league phase of the Europa Conference League. The first leg would be tense, as both teams are practically dead even and the results reflect as much with a 1-1 draw, meaning that it would all come down to the second leg in Eastern Germany. Much like the second leg of last season's fourth round qualifier against Monaco, this one would be where the gates would open for goal scoring left and right. But thanks to timely goals from Marco Tavares and Bradley Kiwa in the latter parts of the second half, we come out with a 4-3 win, and for the second year running, we are in the league phase of the UEFA Europa Conference League. Oh, yeah, our Liga Portugal phase had begun around the third qualifying round, and we managed to go undefeated through August with a pair of wins and a draw, then added a pretty cagey win against Sporting CP to start September, the day before the summer transfer market was set to close. And during that transfer window, our starter at left back in Saif Jassin had his release clause activated by Wolfsburg of the Bundesliga and accepted the offer to go there immediately. On one hand, we got a good chunk of money out of this move. On the other hand, we're kinda without a rather elite left back.
Everybody panic!
So, after a few hours of going through our scouting, we did find a replacement in Danish player Christopher Borup Bro. I'm gonna struggle with that one, so I'm just gonna call him KBB going forward. His deal took some time, some transfer money deferrals for the next 2 years, and our biggest transfer payment to date, but we got it done in time. And as a precaution, we also found this other prospect in Paxi Ruiz in some amateur club in Spain to build up for the future. A few days after the deadline, we got a strong win against Vitória de Guimarães in Liga Portugal, and also got our Europa Conference League game set in stone. This is a much generous draw compared to last year, where Celtic is arguably the strongest team we would be facing, along with Dynamo Kyiv. But first, we kept our unbeaten streak in the league, although with a pair of draws, before our first Conference League game against St. Gallen of Switzerland. Pereira da Costa made his impact on the continental stage with a hat-trick, and we walk out of that game with a dominant 4-0 win on the road. And that just emboldened the rest of that UEFA Europa Conference League campaign. as we only conceded 3 total goals in the 6 league phase games we played, winning all of them sans our encounter against Celtic, which was a 1-0 loss. That performance was more than enough to get us into the top 8 and straight into the competition's round of 16. But while those Conference League games happened throughout the remainder of the calendar year, we were also playing the Liga Portugal games, plus the Taça de Portugal was set to start along with the Allianz Cup's 3rd phase. So let's just go through the rest of these in chronological order. We stayed undefeated through October, dispatching our Felgueiras in the 3rd round of the Taça de Portugal with a 4-1 win, drew against Portimonense in the Allianz Cup, and within the league itself, continued our unbeaten streak with wins and draws alike to keep us in the top 4 of Liga Portugal while heading into November. While we lost Rodrigo Matos to injury for a few weeks during that time frame, we also managed to renegotiate terms with Cho Song-yeon to continue our healthy relationship and to reward him for his fine play.
Very nice! High five!
The rest of the month saw a mixture of competitions being played, as we won against Braga but drew against Vizela in the league, easily dispatched Estoril Praia in the Allianz Cup to head to the semi-finals of the competition, and beat lower league side Juventude Évora in the 4th round of the Taça de Portugal, managing a 2-1 win with a rotated lineup. Portimonense was sorted out as our 5th round opponent in the Taça de Portugal, and the month of December would see us not drop a single league game as of yet, winning KG games against Tondela and Boa Vista, dominating Moreirense, and managing a draw against Benfica to stay in the top 4. This is also around the time in which we gave a fairly big extension to one of our youth academy players that was starting to find his way into the rotation in 6'7" Romanian Portuguese defender Marius Milostivo.
You a big motherfucker.
Oh, right. This is around the time where we get the news that our Allianz Cup semi-final matchup is against Porto. At least it's a good thing that it's not until late January, and so we can hunker down and focus on the schedule ahead. Crossing our fingers for the best, we move on as David Ferreira da Costa picks up the penchant for goal scoring by getting 4 of them against Rio Ave. Kevin dos Santos gets a brace against Portimonense in the Taça de Portugal 5th round, and aside from getting the worst possible draw for the quarterfinals of said Portuguese Cup against Benfica, we keep the unbeaten form in Liga Portugal by drawing against Porto, beating Aroca in a close game, and then defeating Nacional da Madeira 3-0 to find ourselves in 3rd place on the table. The month of January is also interesting because we do have our scouting network looking at possibilities of adding one final piece to the puzzle to give the necessary push for the latter stages of the Conference League and in our domestic games. And that all gets pushed into overdrive after we get an offer that we admittedly cannot refuse for Federico Gomes-Gerth to head to PSV in the Netherlands for 8.5 million. Don't get me wrong, he's been an incredible keeper for us and admittedly our main penalty kick taker for the past year and a half, but we're most likely not going to get a better offer for him down the line. So we accept it and take the money, use it to buy a cheap depth goalie in Diogo Pinto for 975k, and we then make the biggest move in club history as of yet. After some back and forth negotiations with Ligue 2 side Le Havre AC and a total transfer fee of 23.5 million divided in installments for the next few years, loyalty bonuses, a high wage, and a big percentage of profit if we were to sell the player, we managed to snag one of the best young goalkeeper prospects in the world in 21-year-old Frenchman Rémi Boichereau. And while we would be without Marco Tavares and also Ricardo Rojas due to injuries for the semi-final against Porto in the Allianz Cup, Boichereau would get his debut with the club in one of the higher pressure situations a young keeper like him could face. Even though he let in 2 goals in his debut, União de Tomar would score 4 goals in the first half alone, and then hold steady in the second half to win 4-2 and head to their 3rd straight Allianz Cup final. And if it's not Porto on the other side of the final, it is, in fact, most likely to be Benfica, and that's exactly the case here. Now, for the last 8 or so seasons, we've had our struggles against Benfica in big cup games of any kind. Our team has gradually grown stronger through these years, but, well...
Flashback to the future!
The more things change, the more they stay the same. I'm not really looking forward to the Taça de Portugal quarterfinals against them, but let's keep it moving along, as the winter transfer deadline is here. We have found a decent squad player in attacking midfielder Junior Trellis hanging around in free agency, so we snagged them before the window closed. As the window closed, we also did beat Desportivo Chaves halfway through the day, and then got the news that Marco Tavares had twisted his ankle. Yes, that was within hours of him coming back to rehabilitate from the calf strain he suffered last month. I don't know about you, but I'm starting to think that this man's cursed. The timing is also not ideal because we've got the Taça de Portugal quarterfinal against Benfica within 2 days after Tavares re-injured himself. We would be the hosts this time around, but hey, we yet again have our boogeyman team in a cup competition and... Wait, why is the bid not happening right now? No, really, we're just seeing goals and highlights and... Yeah, I can see Sunsa Bell scored a crucial tying goal at the death, but that just means it's more pain and extra time. Oh my god. Well, all I know right now is that we made it back to the semifinals. So, who do we play next? Who do we play next? I should have known there was a catch to the Benfica win. While the Portuguese Cup semi-final is a two-legged affair, Porto has basically made it a point to just be the bane of our existence since the Allianz Cup win 2 seasons ago. The rest of the month of February is a bit of a mixed bag too, as we draw against Sporting CP, get blanked out by Porto in a 2-0 loss as the bastards snap our 44 unbeaten game streak in Liga Portugal, and while we do win our next 2 in the league, Porto yet again imposes their will on us by winning 2-1 in the first leg of the Taça de Portugal semi-final. Oh, and our round of 16 game in the UEFA Europa Conference League, it's against Celtic, who beat us in the league phase. February sucked, let's move on to March, shall we? Portimonense and Famalicão are taken down to start the month in Liga Portugal, and in between those games, we end up traveling to Scotland for a boring 0-0 draw at Celtic Park for the first leg of the Europa Conference League round of 16. But in the second leg, Pereira da Costa came through in the clutch with a 82nd minute goal to give us the 1-0 win at home and to put us through to the Europa Conference League quarterfinals. A huge win on the continental stage would soon be followed by Porto coming into town for the second leg of the Taça de Portugal semi-final, as we now had a 2-1 deficit to overcome in the aggregate score, in which we evened the aggregate score with a Junior Trellis goal in the first 38 seconds of the game. Then Trellis scored another one in the 29th minute to make it 3-2 in the aggregate. Honestly, if I wasn't seeing this happen, I certainly wouldn't believe it. We're leading 2-0 against Porto, the defending domestic treble champions, and we're outperforming them? The absolute aura in Estádio União de Tomar is something else because we keep them out of the score sheet and we somehow, someway turn it around and have made it to the final of the Taça de Portugal once again. And we have defeated 2 of Portugal's big 3 on our way to that final. So it does make sense that the third, less spoken about giant would be waiting on the other side of the bracket for us. Sporting Clube de Portugal. Outside of winning the Taça de Portugal 2 seasons ago against Braga and making 3 Allianz Cup finals, since my time at União de Tomar, you've been a bit dormant for one of the mighty big 3. But we'll worry about you on June 1st, because right now, our quarterfinal match for the UEFA Europa Conference League is decided. We're getting Villarreal once again, and with it, a rematch from last year's round of 16. But before we get to that, a 4-0 thrashing of Estoril Praia has us leaping over Benfica for second place on the table, and an unbeaten month of March prior to leaping into April to take down Moreirense with a Marco Tavares hat-trick, which has us within 3 points of Porto in first place in Liga Portugal. Tavares would also make an impact on the continental stage shortly thereafter, as he's the one who eventually scores the game-winning goal in a 2-1 win against Villarreal in the first leg of the UEFA Europa Conference League quarterfinal. The team then proceeded to capitalize with a win on the road against Braga to get us tied up in points on the league table with only 5 games to go in Liga Portugal. The title race would be set between us and Porto, but prior to that, we gotta jet off to Spain for the second leg of the Europa Conference League quarterfinal. Last season, a tough game against Villarreal in their home was what sent us home from continental football, but this time around, I can say with confidence that we have a much better team to handle the pressure of an away leg. And it eventually showed in the 35th minute of the first half, as Jude Simsapel opened up the scoring, and then proceeded to score 2 more goals in the second half. While Villarreal got 2 of their own, Luka Lukanic added 1 in stoppage time for a 4-2 win, and União de Tomar reaching their first ever continental semi-final. And as for our opponent, it'd be the team that eliminated Benfica from the competition in the quarterfinals, Galatasaray. They have some extra motivation for the semi-final because the final of the UEFA Europa Conference League is being played in their stadium. Hey, is Mauro Icardi still with this team? He retired? Well, that's one joke gone out the window. Anyways, wins against Vizela and then Boavista soon followed to wrap up April, although we do lose one of our assist maestros in Nikola Jojic for 3 weeks or so due to a foot injury in May. The first match of May would have us hosting Galatasaray for the first leg of the Europa Conference League semis, and 14,000 are there to witness us come out victorious in a 4-2 win, and with the slight advantage before heading to Turkey for the second leg days later. Before we could do that, we yet again found ourselves struggling against Tondela, ending up with a 0-0 draw that put a damper on our league title hopes. But the time to focus on that would come much later, because the second leg of the UEFA Conference League was here and the Turkish crowd was rabid to see their club turn it around. Cho Sung-yoon scored the game's first goal in 5 minutes from a set piece, and while Galatasaray would score a pair of goals of their own to keep it close, Ricardo Rojas and Marco Tavares contributed with goals of their own to win the game 3-2, ruin the dreams of thousands of Turkish Galatasaray fans, to the joy of Besiktas and Fenerbahce fans, and continued this immense European run as we would head to the UEFA Europa Conference League finals. Our reward for the trials and tribulations we've been through to get to this point? I'd ask what they're doing here, but let's be real, bro. Barcelona's won this competition at this point. The situation in Europe is a lot more dire than I ever thought it could be. While we now had the excitement of 2 finals to look forward to, our Liga Portugal hopes and dreams came to an end because Benfica decided to be stubborn and played us to a scoreless draw, while Porto had won the day before, thus making it a 4-point differential between us and them, guaranteeing Porto their 4th league title in 5 years. We do end the league in 2nd place, which is pretty neat, all things considered. But now, the focus is fully shifted to 2 games. Sporting CP in the Taça de Portugal final, and Manchester United in the UEFA Europa Conference League final. 2 games within 3 days of each other. The Europa Conference League final is the first one on the table, but since it is a continental final, let's jump forward 3 days and talk about the Taça de Portugal final first. Because for Sporting CP, this was the only way that they could see European football next year, given their terrible league campaign this season. Also, we'll cover this one first because the game itself actually ended up being a defensive affair. Saves were made, chances were missed, and 90 minutes could not decide a winner. But in extra time, well, the decision to extend Jude Simsapel's deal paid itself off in spades as he scores an absolute thunderous goal from long distance in the 112th minute. And that goal would be enough as the boys held steady and for the first time in their history União de Tomar will lift the Taça de Portugal. 2 domestic cups in our 8 years of managing the club is better than what I would have imagined. But of course, there was also the UEFA Europa Conference League final against one of the winningest clubs in the entirety of the world. For all intents and purposes, Manchester United is not what they used to be in the 90s and even the 2000s. And yet, this is still an English club that sports the kind of riches and talent unlike anything we've ever faced. Thiago Motta had been given the reins as manager since the 2025 season, and they still sported a plethora of talent in players like Captain Marcus Rashford, Frankie de Jong, Jorel Hato, Kobe Mainu, Lisandro Martinez, Alejandro Garnacho.
2 hours later.
Also, longtime Portugal national team stalwart Bruno Fernandes was in his last season as a professional player. So, as we travel to Turkey for the 3rd time this season, there was no bigger spotlight so far in our lives. No pressure.
I'm not feeling the pressure, no. You cannot put pressure on me, no chance.
The first half of the game was more of a feeling out process with very few chances between both teams. But in the second half, well, Manchester United decided to step it up accordingly as Boyshadow and our defense remained the only reason why we didn't go down 2-0 during it. But even through various chances by the Red Devils, we survived long enough to drag this one into extra time, where we still kept getting peppered by shots left, right, and center. Seriously, we only had 2 shots on goal this entire game. It's very, very clear that there's a difference in levels here. And yet, União de Tomar did enough to keep Manchester United off the score sheet and with it, dragging the English elites to penalty kicks. The first round does not start well for either team as Bruno Fernandes hits the post on his attempt and Cho Sang-yun's attempt is saved. Marcus Rashford and Rodrigo Matos go on to convert theirs, making it 1-1. Garnacho steps up for Man United next and he makes it. And, thankfully, Marco Tavares' PK goes in to even things up on the scoreboard. It would then be Tyler Morton, a former Liverpool Academy player, stepping up to take the next penalty. What a save! And soon after that, Potsky Ruiz manages to just get his PK attempt past the Man United keeper. It was now down to the final round as Manchester United's own Korean wonder kid Lee Min had to convert this to keep it going. And he did. And the pressure was now entirely on the shoulders of Nikita Michelsons, a young man who'd been getting high praise as one of the best young players on the planet, and someone we actually extended earlier in the year to be a part of this squad for the next few years to come. And now, he has the chance to write his name in the history books. Eight years ago, this team was a semi-professional club playing 4th Division football in a 500-seat municipal stadium. And now, we're the UEFA Europa Conference League champions. Not only that, we also brought in a Taça de Portugal to make it a double for the entirety of the season.
This is too good to be true. Ain't no way in hell.
Sure, you can call it lucky. 99 times out of 100, we most likely get stomped by this Manchester United team. Hell, in an alternate universe, this exact scenario happens and we are on the losing end of penalty kicks. But in this one, União de Tomar have won their way up through divisions, made themselves a top 4 team in the country, and now they've got domestic and continental cups to their name. The individual accolades should be pointed out too, as Cho Sang-yun won the competition's Golden Boot Award with 15 goals, breaking the team's goal-scoring record with 29 of them total in the year, and Marco Tavares won the Conference League's Player of the Season award, along with the Young Player of the Season award. Additionally, Luka Lukanic won his second Fans' Player of the Season award. But with the 2030-31 season wrapped up and the emergence of a new decade, União de Tomar was no longer just some up-and-coming plucky club that kept overachieving. This season, these 2 trophies we won, there are eyes on us now. There's going to be expectations to prove that this isn't a fluke, to be competitive in European competitions, to challenge for domestic cups, and to be the best of the rest among all Portuguese clubs. This isn't the ending to a footballing fairy tale. We've just simply arrived at the starting line. The real work starts now.